Two music labels, historic with their presence, giants in the industry. Let's talk about it. Coming up next, Trust and Believe. Let me see if I can sing this. Trust and believe. Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into episode 120 of the NOMADCAST, a podcast that covers multiple topics. I'm your host, Mr. Anderson. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, today is Friday, y'all. It's a segment I like to call Finally It's Friday, where we let our hair down. In my case, lack of hair, at least at the top of the dome, right? Hey, so today we're going to go back into the archives. We're going to talk about the Motown sound versus the Philadelphia sound. Now, if you're not familiar with the Philadelphia sound, we're talking about the OJs, the Stylistics, and all those great groups from the 60s and 70s up against the Motown sound, the Temptations, Diana Ross, the Supremes, so on and so forth. So we're going to take this episode. It's originally aired the 4th of March of 2022, episode 82. So sit back, relax, enjoy as we take a flashback talking about the Motown sound versus the Philadelphia sound. Stay tuned, stay locked. Appreciate it, y'all. Let's say it together. Trust and believe. Right, so today we're going to have a fun topic, a great Friday topic, and it relates to music. And I kind of previewed it yesterday. But we're going to talk about two phenomenal, monumental sounds, groundbreaking sounds from the late 60s and the late 70s. And the title is Who Had the Best Sound Between Motown, my home city, Detroit, and the Philadelphia sound. These two musical powers back in the 70s was critical with developing and having these guys and gals go out, sing their hearts out. The writers write their heart out. The producers make these beats. Phenomenal time. If you grew up in that era, and I was a child during that time. I was born in '74, so a lot of those songs I remember listening to it on the old school stereo, the vinyl records, all that, man. I remember that stuff, and I'm definitely, for people that know me, I'm definitely an old soul. I love that old '60s. 70s music is just something about it. It's like you can feel it. You can feel the emotion. You can feel the sweat. You can feel the love. You can feel the lyrics. You can feel the harmony. You can feel the beat. Not hearing the beat, you can feel it. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you're music inclined, you know what I'm talking about. When I hear Motown, Detroit, I grew up in it. Parents, grandmother, aunts, everybody. I know Motown. Philadelphia. I've never been to Philadelphia, but I know it's a certain intimacy with some of those songs, and we'll talk about them. So again, we're going to talk about who had the best sound between Motown and the Philadelphia soul, otherwise known as TSOP, the sound of Philadelphia. I broke it down into categories. So we're going to start with history, the history of Motown. Then I'm going to have the top 10 acts, top 10 artists from Motown. Then we'll transition into the sound of Philadelphia, the history of it, top 10 acts, top 10 artists from the sound of Philadelphia. And then we'll go ahead and pivot on back to Motown, the top 6 songs, my personal top 6 songs from Motown, and the top 6 songs from Philadelphia soul. Now, to ensure that I don't violate any YouTube copyright or artist or record company restrictions or anything of that nature, I will not be playing any of those songs. However, when I talk about the top 6 songs from Motown and the top 6 songs from Philadelphia, I'll show a picture of the artist and I'll name the title of the song along with its associated album cover or singles cover as well. The Lord has blessed me with many talents, but ladies and gentlemen, He didn't bless me with a singing voice. So instead of me trying to sing, talking about my girl, I'll just name Temptations, My Girl. You'll see the picture. That'll save yourself an earache, and that'll save myself from an earache, because Lord knows this man cannot sing. And then after that, we'll wrap everything up with cultural influence, just a couple bullet points of what I think about how this music, Motown and Philadelphia, influenced the culture for all races. and we'll close it out on a Friday and move on to this weekend. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, this segment is called Who Had the Best Sound, Motown or Philadelphia Soul? So let's go ahead and transition into history. We're going to talk about the history of Motown. Again, I'm a little biased with this. Growing up in Detroit, parents in Detroit, whole family in Detroit. So I definitely understand the influence of Motown, the impact of Motown. And the fun fact, my mother actually was supposed to audition for Berry Gordy in the late 60s. She pulled up to West Grand Boulevard. As you can see here, this is Hitsville, USA. Me and my family went there last year. And she actually pulled up in front of Hitsville and was supposed to audition for Berry Gordy. But circumstances, you know, I don't know the deets of what happened, but nonetheless, she didn't audition for him. And I think that's probably one of her biggest regrets. But I look at it as like it's just one of those things in history. The ship is kind of sailed. And if she had a, audition, she could have been a star. This guy sitting in front of you, this guy that you're listening to, wouldn't have been here, wouldn't have had a family, so on and so forth. So a lot of times we look at ourselves and look at our lives and say, why me? I should have did this. I regret this. But the Lord knows what he's doing. All right. The Lord definitely knows what he's doing. All right. So let's get back on track here. We're going to talk about the history of Motown. Motown was founded in Detroit, January 12, 1959, in Detroit, Michigan by Berry Gordy. Now, a little history on Berry Gordy. He was a factory worker at a Ford plant in Detroit. And he wanted the record label to resemble an assembly line plant. Move from here to here to here to here, product to the customer. That's what he wanted. The records were crafted similar to an auto factory assembly line because that was Berry Gordy's route. Just like a lot of folks back in the day, they all worked at the auto plants. The main songwriters at Motown were Smokey Robinson, Eddie Holland, Lamont Dozier, and Norman Whitfield, and also Brian Holland, who was Eddie Holland's brother. He was there as well, crafting some of those hits. Unfortunately, Motown moved to Los Angeles in 1972, thus breaking up the marriage, the city of Detroit and Los Angeles, moving from the grit and the grime of Detroit, the sound of Detroit, taking it to the West Coast and Hollywood. And a lot of people say that's where Motown kind of met the death knell. And the main reason why Berry Gordy moved Motown to Los Angeles, because he wanted to start venturing into films, and he made Mahogany and some of these other films. He felt that the music thing was great, but he wanted to be greater. Sometimes in life you want to be good, but sometimes in life you want to be great. But I don't know if that was the right decision for Motown. It may have been a great decision for Berry Gordy because he wanted to transition into films. But a lot of people said, I even remember my mother saying this, they wish they had left a record company in Detroit. They still had an off-site building, and that building is still there in Detroit with Motown, but the majority of Motown and its acts, they moved to Los Angeles in 1972. And a lot of people say that's where Motown kind of failed, and, the rest is history. All right, so that's a little wave top on Motown. Let's go ahead and transition into the sound of Philadelphia. The Sound of Philadelphia was founded in Philadelphia in 1971 by Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and Tom Bell, who will join them later, as you can see here. The Sound of Philadelphia had a funk influence and lush instrumental arrangements, sweeping strings, and piercing horns. You can hear all of that in most of the Sound of Philadelphia music. All of their songs, you just know it. When you hear it, you know that's TSOP, the Sound of Philadelphia, that Philadelphia soul. The label was credited for laying the groundwork for disco, which is another fun fact. And it was home to a lot of monumental acts as well. So speaking of acts, let's go and segue into the top 10 acts from Motown. The top 10 acts from Motown: The Temptations, The Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, The Four Tops, Jackson 5, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Diana Ross, and the Commodores. A lot of people don't realize the Commodores were part of Motown as well. That's when Lionel Richie was still with them. course, he ended up going solo and had a phenomenal career on his own. So let's transition to the top 10 acts from the Philadelphia Soul, the sound of Philadelphia. The OJs, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Billy Paul, Lou Rawls, Teddy Pendergrass, the Spinners. Fun fact, the Spinners are actually from Detroit. McFadden and Whitehead, Major Harris, the Stylistics, and the Delphonics. Think about that. I just named 20 people, 10 from Philadelphia, 10 from the Motown. And I bet when I read those names, you could just see them. You can hear some of those songs. So let's go ahead and transition to the top 6 songs. This is my personal opinion. The top 6 songs from Motown. Again, I can't play the song due to copyright infringements. I don't want any copyright. I don't want no corporate lawyers knocking on my door, right? So again, I'll just name the artist, and I will name the artist and the song and show the applicable album cover or the applicable singles cover. This is in no order, but I just put top 6. The top 6 songs from Motown. The Temptations, My Girl. Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. The Temptations again, Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Tears of a Clown. Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On. And the Supremes, Where Did Our Love Go? All right, so that was the top 6 songs, my personal opinion, from Motown. Now let's go ahead and move to the top 6 songs from the Philadelphia Soul. The OJs, Backstabbers. Billy Paul, Me and Mrs. Jones. The OJs, For the Love of Money. The Stylistics, Betcha by Golly Wow. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Hope That We Be Together Soon. OJs, Stairway to Heaven. Fun fact, Stairway to Heaven is probably, I will say, in my top 4 songs of all time, Stairway to Heaven is number 1. Stairway to Heaven is my favorite song ever, to include rap, R&B, pop, whatever. Stairway to Heaven is my favorite song of all time. Reason being, when you hear Stairway to Heaven from the OJs, you feel the 1970s. You hear in those horns and some of that bass, the acoustics, the way the Leverts and those guys sound, the fusion of their voices together, all 3 of them. It's something about that song. When I hear Stairway to Heaven, even though the OJs are from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, and the record label was in Philadelphia, whenever I hear that song, I feel 1970s Detroit, the potholes, the smoke coming through the ground, the traffic, the people walking around. I don't know what it is. I could just sense it. Maybe it's that old soul in me. It feels like grit, feels like concrete. It's harmonious. It's love. It's intimate. Like, here we go, climbing the stairway to heaven. I mean, just think about that. Again, the fusion of their voices, the OJs, those deep voices, and oh my gosh, phenomenal. All right, so we talked about the top 6 songs from Motown, the top 6 songs from Philadelphia. Let's go ahead and transition to cultural influence. And I kind of touched on it. When you think about those songs, at least for me, those songs, they were from the late 60s, the 1970s. It just feels old school. Even when I play them in my truck, right, or even at home through Apple or whatever music source I use, even though the sounds are modernized, they're improved with the digital world and everything, those songs still feel old. They have a record player feel to it. Just, man, I'll tell you, it's just something about them records from back in the day. Again, I'm an old soul, right? I'm 47, but sometimes song-wise, I feel a little older. And I'd much rather listen to records from the 60s, particularly really the 70s. Something about that era, that decade from 1970 to probably 79. you can see the transition in songs. You can see the transition of some of these songs I just named. And a lot of people don't realize when I named the Lou Rawls and the Stylistics and the OJs and some of these folks, a lot of people can't even associate those guys with the Philadelphia sound. When you hear Motown, you hear the Temptations, you hear Diana Ross, the Supremes, the Four Tops, all these guys, you know that's Detroit. You know that's Motown. It's synonymous, right? It goes hand in hand. But when you hear the OJs, you hear Billy Paul, Major Harris, some of these old school groups, a lot of times people don't associate it with the Philadelphia sound. I could be wrong in that. But again, just growing up in Detroit, I know Smokey Robinson, the Temptations, that's Motown all day. But I didn't learn later in life that the OJs and Lou Rawls and Billy Paul and Teddy Pendergrass, I didn't know they was part of the Philadelphia soul. Again, that's, ignorance on me, but I didn't learn that till years later. And then you associate with those different acts. It's amazing. All these guys that just named, a lot of them wasn't from Detroit. A lot of them wasn't from Philadelphia. But when you integrated all of these guys, they comprised that sound. They comprised that grit. They made that grit. They had the intimate, the love, the sweat, the tears, the lyrics, the beats, the sounds, the horns, the treble, the guitars, everything. It was Philadelphia. It was Detroit. And I don't think outside of Memphis, and maybe because Memphis has Stax Records and some of these other places, I don't think two cities can go against Detroit and Philadelphia, particularly in the 1960s and 70s. Again, I'd love to hear you guys comment on that, especially the folks that actually was teenagers or young adults during that time. Again, I was just a little cat in diapers in 74. But again, I hear those records. They remind me of cleaning the house on a Saturday, early in the morning, hearing Stairway to Heaven, or Backstabbers, or Me and Mrs. Jones, hearing those old songs. And a lot of the old school folks, the seniors, they thought that, it was, you shouldn't listen to those records. It's a secular style of music, but the music was great. The biggest problem is a lot of those folks, the groups, the males, the females, they had a lot of scandals, cheating, adultery, domestic violence, so on and so forth. You can look at YouTube and look at some documentaries. And some of these people they wasn't the greatest people on earth. That's been documented. Those are facts. That's not my opinion. But again, if you strip all that away, cut that fat all out the way, the music was freaking phenomenal. And I will argue against anybody. I don't think no sound was greater than the Motown sound and the Philadelphia sound of the late 60s and 70s. Now, there may have been some that can compare a close, but I think just from cultural influence, cultural impact, think about, how everything was in the 60s, late 60s, and then the decades were just totally different. You know what I mean? Kind of went off on a tangent here. But to me, that's the cultural influence. Just hearing those songs, hearing the riffs, the notes, the harmonies, the voices, the basses, the altos, all that's culture. Whether you white, black, red, brown, gray, whatever. Everyone loved those records. Hall & Oates was part of the sound of Philadelphia. You know what I mean? So it tell you, it doesn't matter whether you white or black. Can you play the music? How do you hear the music? And probably more importantly, what mood does the music put you in? And I think that's something that's missing with modern records. So quick, so fast, gotta have it. It's a microwave society. Well, back then they took time to craft these records. They took time to shape these records. They took time to create these records. It's like Berry Gordy. It was an assembly line. You got to go from A, B to C, and out to the consumer was D. You know what I mean? So I think that's what was missing. So that's my take on culture influence. And that kind of wraps everything up here on a Friday. Finally, it's Friday again, just to wrap everything up and put a bow on it. We talked about who has the best sound. We asked the question, who has the best sound between Motown and Philadelphia. We talked about the history of both Motown and Philadelphia. We talked about the acts, top 10 acts of both Motown, Philadelphia. Talked about the 6 songs, my personal favorite 6 songs for Motown, my personal favorite 6 Philadelphia songs. And we talked about culture and influence. And I think we kind of, the only thing missing is we couldn't play the songs. You know, again, I ain't trying to be stuck with these corporate lawyers and talking about this and that. So I think just showing the picture and talking about the record, talking about how the records influenced me, how they continue to influence me. Again, just growing up in Detroit, man, I those sounds, man, it's just something about it. Can't explain it. But that concludes today's, finally is Friday here on the 4th of March, episode 82 of the Trust and Believe NOMADCAST. And as we, send everybody off this weekend, again, have a great weekend, a safe weekend. And as I stated in the intro, don't feel obligated that you have to do things this weekend. You listen to the internet, you watch social media. Oh, if you sleep 9 hours of the day, you're wrong. You're slacking on life. Look, man. When you're tired, you're tired. You guys work Monday through Friday. If you want to take a Saturday to close your eyes, sit on the couch, sit in the bed, and eat Doritos, do whatever you need to do. You have to do what you need to do to make you happy. Don't worry about what they doing. Don't worry about what he doing. Don't worry about what she doing. Worry about what are you doing. Have a plan, man. If your plan this weekend is to not go out and get drunk, but your plan is to stay inside and get drunk, that's your plan. That's all you, man. That's all you. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. In some parts of the country, the weather's getting better. For those that like to go outside, enjoy yourself. Go shopping. Go to the store. Go to the movies. Chill at home. Go on a date. Do whatever you want to do. This is your time. We only get one lap around this thing. So make it count. So don't feel guilty that you're going to, make someone feel bad. Oh, I know we're supposed to go out, but I can't. Look, man, I don't feel like going out. I don't want to go out. But what are you going to do? I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to eat chips. I'm going to watch TV. You know what I'm saying? So that's the kind of attitude that we have. Not that you're trying to duck people or you don't. Sometimes, man, you just got to just take care of you. Self-care. I talked about that in many episodes ago. It's all about you. Have fun this weekend and be safe. All the best. Trust and believe. See you guys Monday. Thanks for tuning in.